Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. So I was thinking about the topic for today's video, and I just decided to talk about the changes in the pawn structure, which of course also leads to changes in plans. This game was a game that I played, and I want to show you the whole game for the purpose of understanding why I should have changed the pawn structure or why I should not have changed the pawn structure. This was played on a tournament and I just started with c4 and my opponent played e6. Now I'm not going to go so much over the opening theory because that's not very important for you probably unless you play the same opening as me. But okay, I just played g3 and we see some normal opening moves, development of the pieces. And now okay, this bishop to d6 move isn't a very correct move because this d6 square here isn't really the right place for the bishop. This bishop usually goes to this e7 square because on this d6 square it can a lot of times be put under some tempo moves. So that's why players with the black pieces in this position usually don't play bishop to d6. But okay, she played it and I castled. And if you're wondering why am I not protecting this pawn here on c4, she can't really take it. I mean, she can, but the point is that it's not a problem if she takes my pawn, because as you can see, this diagonal for my bishop has opened, and it's a pretty good thing for me, and I will also regain this pawn back probably on c4. And my move here would be a4. That's my line. I tried to just play knight to a3 and take this pawn, and probably queen to c2, rook to d1, and d3. These are my moves if she takes my pawn. But okay, whatever, she didn't do this. She castled, and now I played b3, finally defending my pawn. Okay, she just played b6 and played for an interesting setup here with black, and I think that it's a pretty good one with the bishop on b7. Okay, so I just developed my pieces, she does the same, and okay, I just put the pieces on their best squares, queen to e2 and c5, striking in the center. And here I know that I have to take the pawn here on d5 and then play d4. This is the thing that I learned, and I think that it's pretty solid. So I'm of course happy if she takes my pawn, because I take it with a knight, and she has this isolated pawn here, and she doesn't have really any big compensation for this isolated pawn, which is, oh sorry, maybe I should put it in, wait, god damn it, maybe I should put this one in red. Wait, what? God damn. In red color. Okay, that's better. And this would be fine for me. But okay, of course, she didn't take my pawn. She played her rook on the same file as my queen is, which could sometimes be a problem with her taking, and I can't recapture with the pawn because of my queen here hanging. But okay, this isn't the case now, and I just developed my rook to this c1 square. Now she did the same to the c8 square, and now here is the critical moment, I think, of the game. Actually, in this position I didn't really know what to do, because you can try to think about this position and come up with a move, with a logical move and a logical plan, but I didn't find it because it's pretty difficult to find a plan in this position. So I just played a normal looking move, rook to d1. But what was the point here? We can see that everything is based on the center here. You can see that these pawns here are fighting, and almost everything is going around this center. That's also why I played rook to d1 to, put some pressure here along this d file. But it actually wasn't the right move, because I didn't really have a plan. I just played rook to d1, and then I didn't know what to do on the next move. So the correct way here would be for me to just take this pawn on c5. Now what is the point? I'm trying to change the pawn structure. And as you know, with the changes of the pawn structure, the plants in the position also change. I talked about this in one of my previous videos. I suggest you to check it out. Black, as you can see, has two options of recapturing the pawn. These are pawn takes on c5 and bishop takes on c5, and both lead to different pawn structures. First of all, let's see what happens if black takes on c5 with his pawn. We can see that now we get these hanging pawns here, and as you know, they could become a weakness if I attack them and successfully stop them from being so active like they are now. As you can see, they're controlling a lot of squares here. But here what is still slightly better. Now what would be White's plan in this position? Let's think about it and see. As I said, my plan against the hanging pawns should be to just attack them hard, because they can't be protected from other pawns just from the pieces. And the other thing also is to just make them move. Maybe with moves like b4. And for example, if black moves to this c4 square, we got a very bad backwards d5 pawn. Okay, let's just imagine that okay, this happens. And just don't look at this pawn which is hanging. I just did this to show you what happens. You can see that this d5 pawn is very bad. It's a backwards pawn. It can't be protected by other pawns. It's going to get attacked by, for example, rook to d1, and just you can also see that this d4 square is very weak, and our knight could just jump here on this square. Our plan would be successful, but of course this isn't possible here, but it could be if I prepare it. But anyways, in this position, I think the best plan is to kinda put the knight on this a4 square and really try to attack this c5 pawn here by playing moves like bishop to a3 maybe, and doubling up the rooks to really put a big amount of pressure on this c5 pawn. So that's one option here. As you can see, if black takes on c5 with the pawn and enters the hanging pawns. Now the other option, of course, is to take this pawn with a bishop. And now, as you can see, black gets this isolated pawn. I've also made videos on both pawn structures, so feel free to check it out. But okay, here, as we can see, we know the basic plans. When playing against the isolated pawn, we want to put our rook, on the same file to just attack this isolated pawn here. We want to make it a weakness, because it's not a weakness yet. There are a lot of pieces on the board. It's a pretty dynamic piece. It gives black more space. It also allows moves like knight to e4, and black just has more freedom, but it could become a weakness. So I'm not calling it a weakness, and I'm not calling it a strength, really. It's actually a dynamical strength and a static weakness. But anyways, of course we want to block this. Just a sec. We want to block this isolated pawn from not moving. We don't want to exchange our pawn for this pawn. We want to just make this pawn a weakness. As you can see, our knight stands well here on this d4 square, just protecting him from going anywhere. And we basically want to exchange all the minor pieces, which are knights and bishops, and we want to be left with heavy pieces, which are rooks and queens. That's because we're going to put more pressure on this pawn easier. Because see, now this pawn is a dynamical strength, because it allows all the black pieces to activate and just have more space, as you can see. But if all these minor pieces are exchanged, this pawn here is going to become a weakness. So this is my plan if she changes the pawn structure to an isolated pawn structure. So she would have these two options, and some of these two situations would happen if I decided to change the pawn structure here in this position. But I didn't really want to play this. I just played a move that, it's a normal move, but it's not the best move in these positions. Put your rooks on their best squares, but here in this position, I really should have think critically and just decide to change the pawn structure. And it's also useful for just getting my knowledge on these pawn structures. If I did that, you know, I would have gained more knowledge. But okay, I didn't do this. I played rook to d1 and he played her queen to this e7 square. And I again had the option to just change the pawn structure, but you guessed it, I didn't do it. I just played a4. This wasn't a great thing to do. Why did I play a4? I have no idea. Actually, I couldn't find a move in this position. I couldn't find a plan other than, you know, changing the pawn structure here, which I didn't want to do because of, I don't know, I thought she's going to take it with a pawn, and for some reason I didn't want to play this position, even though it's totally fine for white and for black, maybe slightly better for white, but what can I do? I didn't play this, I played a4. Now, as you can probably imagine, this pawn on b3 could be pretty weak, so that's also why a4 wasn't a very good move. Now the thing that I want you guys to understand here is that how important it is to recognize your advantage of being able to change the pawn structure. Because if you're the one with the possibility of changing the pawn structure in your favor, then you have the advantage. So when you have the possibility of changing the pawn structure, try to analyze the position and just come to a solution if it's the right moment to change it or not. If you know that it is the right moment, then don't be afraid to change the pawn structure. Because if you don't do it, it might be too late to do it later. Your opponent could take this possibility away from you. And even though if the timing of this change of the pawn structure wasn't the best, it's still nice because you will learn from it, you will be better the next time. So don't be afraid to change it and get some experience. So from this position on, guys, the pawn structure actually changed because she did a mistake. But I don't want this video to be too long. I suggest that we continue analyzing this game in another video if you want to. But if you want to see something else, then just comment down below. I will be very happy to see any suggestions because that's the only way that we can improve. So I really hope that you guys learned something from this video and also enjoyed. If you have any recommendations, again, please type them in chat. I will be very happy to see them. So thank you guys for watching and I'll see you in the next video.